Hey, it's Wiebe, and I am on my daily walk. If you've been wondering why I've been capturing some of these thoughts and these ideas as they come to me, instead of going back to the studio or the lab to record myself with proper podcast equipment, it's because these ideas come out of nowhere. So first of all, by documenting them, I always have access to them. I have a catalog of thoughts and ideas that have come to me as they come to me, raw and unfiltered. And second of all, these ideas are usually better captured in the moment. They are better raw and unfiltered than trying to come back to them later and think about what I want to say and formulate what I want to say. By that point, I may have forgotten whatever the original inspiration was. That's why I like to capture these in the moment. Today's podcast is basically about inertia. Inertia describes the tendency for things to stay the same or to remain unchanged. If you've been around this planet for any length of time and someone talks about inertia, what they're usually referring to is, I've been at this thing for a while. I know I need to change, but I don't want to change. The discomfort of facing change feels like it'd be greater than the discomfort of just staying in the situation I'm in and enduring the pain. So it's sort of like better the devil you know than the devil you have no clue about. We could also just say coasting, right? If you're coasting through life, it doesn't mean you're not enjoying it. It basically means you're not really aspiring to more. You don't have ambition. You're not trying to get things. And honestly, that's not a bad place to be sometimes. But when you're enduring the pain and discomfort of something that you know needs to change in your life, you don't generally want to get too comfortable there because the bed of nails just digs deeper into your skin over time. I've been having to face up to a lot more discomfort and inertia as of late. There are some things in my life that I know I've needed to change. I know I've wanted something different, something better, a breakthrough in certain areas of my life, and I sort of coasted. It's not like I wasn't trying for something else, but basically the way it worked was, I'll endure the pain of working with certain clients. I'll stay with them knowing that I only have to dedicate a certain amount of my time to them each week, so the rest of the time I can spend developing my own projects. And in theory, that is how business is supposed to work. You take the time that you have available, not the time that you make, but rather the time that you have available, evenings, weekends, whatever happens to show up in your schedule, and allocate that to building your business. And everything outside of that is pretty much just dedicated to you making a living. If you want to make a living, you work 9 to 5, and if you want to make a killing, then you also work 5 to 9. That's sort of a crude way of explaining it, mind you. I think the truth is, if you want to create a life that you love, you work 5 to 9.
Hey, it's Wiebe in the lab. I felt like this podcast episode started off in the right direction, but when I went back and listened to what else I had to say, I felt like it was a little disjointed and perhaps going off in a tangent that wasn't totally productive. But I think the essence of what I wanted to share from my experience was this. I had to make some very tough decisions in September, October, and November, especially last year. And I filed for a consumer proposal, made a trip to Calgary, got into the second year of my leadership program, also did a production, the 3 project, which I mentioned in the last episode. There were some conversations that really needed to happen desperately with some clients as well regarding the amount of work I was doing for them, or a conversation to have them pay me for the work I had done so far. So really one of the critical things that made a difference for me was getting into conversation, having those rather difficult conversations about income and money and what my expectations were, as well as what was going to work for me based on how things have been going to that point. And the thing about conversations like that is that you can put them off and put them off and put them off and never get around to them, which is ultimately not going to be productive for you. You're just going to spend more time suffering, staying in inertia in those situations. So whether it's your friends or your parents or your bandmates or a coach, it's a good idea to get into conversation when you can't really see for yourself what it is you might be bumping up against. There's conversations to be had that need to be had that you haven't been having. And sometimes when you've stayed in that situation for so long, you can't necessarily see them for yourself. And besides difficult conversations, there are times when you need to take big, uncomfortable actions as well. And I still remember 2011 quite vividly, where I had 5 pretty poorly paying jobs that simply would not budge when I asked for additional work or a change in working situation. And the big action that I had taken at that point was to refinance my mortgage. Now, that wasn't even on the radar for me. I didn't even know that was an option. I got a phone call from the bank asking me if I wanted to refinance my mortgage. And I literally said, "What's that? And how does that work?" Ended up being a blessing, at least for that next year or so. Another thing that can happen is we end up adopting unproductive habits. Like, I had no games on my smartphone prior to Christmas, but Christmas rolled around and I was like, well, I want to spend more time listening to podcasts and watching videos and stuff like that. But I'm not there to work, right? I just want to engage in the content and engage in my own discoveries. This is often what I do around New Year. And I recognize that it was basically just me trying to find a way to keep my fingers or my mind occupied and entertained while I'm listening to business or personal development or leadership or marketing related content. This is not me saying all habits are bad. And in fact, sometimes it's a very healthy thing to do to disengage or disconnect, play a game, do something you enjoy doing, especially when you've planned to do it. But sometimes one poor habit can lead to another, and suddenly you're not exercising, and suddenly you're not practicing your instrument, and suddenly you're not singing as much. And all of a sudden, there's this domino effect that can sometimes happen when you allow yourself to go down that track. Staying in your comfort zone can be a habit. Not having the conversations that you need to have can be a habit. Chances are there's ebbs and flows in life that you can look back on and say, well, I had a really great habit of practicing my guitar for an hour per day at this season in my life, and I haven't been doing it since. How could I reincorporate that specific habit into my life? So in summary, if your music career is not moving, it could be because 1, you're not having the conversations that you need to have. You've been putting them off. You know you need to have them, but you're not having them. So you find it better to stay with the pain, better the devil you know than the one you don't know. And that's your attitude around those conversations right now. It's not easy taking on those conversations, but success in music isn't easy either. So you will have to do things you don't feel like doing or want to do or aren't especially skilled at every now and again to get to where you want to go. And that includes having conversations that need to be had. Number 2 is there could be some big action to take that you have yet to take. This often looks like quitting your job or no longer playing at this venue that's been taking advantage of you, or firing an uncooperative band member. You have to give things a chance. You have to give people a chance. Sometimes there is value in renegotiation, although in my experience, renegotiation is sort of the beginning of the end. You may continue in the same capacity for the next few months or possibly even a year, but after that point, you're probably not going to be in the same position anymore, like it or not. Andrew Hitz from The Entrepreneurial Musician has repeatedly stated that no matter how good things may be in the current situation, maybe it's a gig, maybe it's a job, maybe it's some kind of contract that you've taken on, if you no longer want to continue in the same capacity, the best decision is to leave it behind. It doesn't matter if it's paying 6 figures plus benefits and all these other perks and incentives. It doesn't make a difference. If you're not in it, the best decision is generally to leave because it creates an opening for things that you truly want to create. And then number 3, examine your habits. Have you gotten a little bit lazy? Are you not getting up as early as you used to? Are you not exercising? Are you not practicing your guitar? Are you not doing the things that you used to do when you got inspiration for songs? If you look back on your personal history, you can probably identify 2 or 3 situations that have led to you being inspired to write a song. So if you're not putting yourself in those situations, of course you're not writing any music. So if you enjoyed this episode of the New Music Industry Podcast, I had a fun update to share with you. We recently put together a stylish t-shirt for the podcast, the official The New Music Industry Podcast unisex t-shirt. You can find it at musicentrepreneurhq.com/t-shirt. This has been episode 284 of the New Music Industry Podcast. I'm David Andrew Wiebe, and I look forward to seeing you on the stages of the world.
Thank you for listening. Music in this episode was brought to you by Brian Young. Wherever you're listening to this right now, please consider leaving a 5-star review and comment to help us get the word out about the podcast.